In this week's In-Ear Insights, let's talk about generative AI for sales, both B2B and B2C. How do we use these tools to do arguably one of the most important functions within a company, which is to help bring on new customers? Katie, when you think about sales as a profession, as a discipline, and as a function within a company, what do you see as the major obstacles, period, that sales runs into, that if you were like, oh, if I had a magic wand, I would fix this?
Oh, it's tough. That's such a big question because it's going to be different for every organization. But I guess the common theme, the common deficit I see is collaboration with other teams. And so when I worked at an organization that had a dedicated sales team, there was a disconnect between the product team and the sales team and the marketing team and the sales team. And so product and marketing worked really close together. And then we would bring sales into it. And somehow sales remained on their own island and then would complain that we don't have the latest information. We don't know this. We don't know that. Who's our target audience? Like, who are we going after? Has it changed? And so I guess the thing is like a data sharing and communication breakdown, because sales, from my perspective, like, sales is the last piece of the puzzle. Like, they're the last touch when you're bringing on a new client. First, you have all of these other pieces in the customer journey. So you have your content, you have, marketing campaigns, you have maybe some interaction like webinars and emails and, live shows, but sales isn't in it yet. Sales is the one who comes in at the end to close it. And I think that there's a disconnect in that process. So I don't know if that's the answer you were looking for, but I think that if I had a magic wand to fix, from my perspective, what's wrong with sales, it's that it's a lack of collaboration, which leads to the lack of the most up-to-date information about prospects and customers and the product itself and what you're selling.
Mm-hmm. When I worked at a tech company, the biggest complaint that sales had was that the product they were selling was twice the price and half the quality of the competitors, which was an accurate assessment. It was an overpriced, underperforming piece of software. And so their closing rates for selling were about 1%, right? So out of every 100 opportunities, they closed one of them. And that crap kind of rolled downhill then, because marketing was like, okay, so we just need more leads. We need 3,000 leads a month. And like, you're going to run out of companies to sell to real soon, because there's just not enough companies that are willing to pay exorbitant fees for underperforming software.
Well, and so in that case, it sounds like there was a disconnect between what sales was hearing and what product was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, so that, to me, that comes down to like sort of a communication deficit. And so maybe, things like having an ideal customer profile that everyone has access to, that they can work off of, might be a good solution. I don't think having more meetings so that people can talk to each other is a good solution, because, it's falling on deaf ears. I mean, it's just, that's not working. So more meetings is not the solution.
Yeah. Going back really, really far, Bob Stone's 1968 direct marketing framework, I think, is a really good model for understanding selling in general. And it's 3 layers: list, offer, creative, which is a broad way of saying, are you selling to the right people?
Mm-hmm.
Are you selling to the right people something they want, which is the offer? And then how are you doing the selling? And one of the biggest mistakes I see in generative AI with sales, or in general, but with generative AI and sales specifically, is that people are devoting all their time and effort to the creative portion. Like, how do we update our sales scripts, and how do we make more compelling sales emails and things? And that's the last part of the process. If you're selling to the wrong people, or you're trying to sell people something they don't want, no amount of clever marketing and clever selling scripts is going to change the fact that people are not going to buy from you. And so it seems to me that when we're talking about generative AI in sales, you'd be much better served figuring out, are you selling to the right people? And
Mhm.
are you selling them something they want?
It sounds so simple, and yet
Well, it is simple. It's not easy.
Mhm.
That's the challenge.
Got it. So how do we get there? How do we find out, are we selling to the right people? Because you have, you know, for a company like us, like we're small, we can be agile, we can adjust. We can adjust our services, we can adjust our target audiences. But if you have an enterprise size company with a deep bench of salespeople who are on commission trying to, get the thing done, close it, they have quotas, they have targets, you know, change management is really tricky because it's a cultural change and telling people, okay, now your targets are different. Now you have to do something else is going to be, for lack of a better term, a hard sell because they're like, well, my paycheck is dependent on me making these numbers. So now I have a different audience and different numbers. How does that work? So how do we first solve for who are we selling to, especially if we have it wrong in the first place? And then how do we adjust our tactics?
It's kind of a chicken and the egg, right? So product and sales are chicken and the egg. You have a product, you have to find people who want that,
Mhm.
or you find people, then figure out what product to sell them. It's product market fit, right? Which is a discipline unto itself. The most straightforward way to figure that out is to look at what you have right now for sale and surprise, put it through the 5P framework. What does your product do? What is its purpose? Like, what are your product or services purpose? Because if you don't know what if you have one of those things that, famously is called a solution in search of a problem, you should be updating a LinkedIn profile, because there's no amount of sales training that is going to fix a solution that no one needs, because they don't have that problem.
But Chris, they just don't know they have the problem yet. I'm going to make them aware that they have the problem and then they're going to buy the thing.
Which works for creating a new market if you have 10 years and $100 million to invest in it, because that's about what it takes to build a brand new market that is sustainable. Really good example of this: HubSpot uh, took 10 years and $100 million
Mhm.
of marketing to create inbound marketing, to create this discipline that did not exist before, and
Mhm.
to identify the problem, and to convince people it was a problem, and then to
Mhm.
get people to buy their product. And that is a totally valid strategy if you have the money to do it, because then you own that market, right? No one else owns inbound marketing the way HubSpot owns inbound marketing. In the same way that, no one owned the smartphone category the way Apple did in its first couple years when the iPhone first came out. But they spent years and giant piles of money. That's really tricky for any company that isn't, well funded by a
Mhm.
VC with an enormous amount of patience, or an existing company that is willing to just burn money for a whole bunch of time. Like, Meta has been doing that for 5 years now, trying to convince everyone that VR and the metaverse is a thing. Uh, and by your reaction, you can see how well that effort is going. In particular, even though they're still working on it, it's just going to take another 5 years and
Mhm.
hundreds of millions of dollars to convince people that this thing
Yeah, of
is
course
is
you
a
have one.
solution, right? This is a solution, but it's a solution to a problem most people don't have, which
Right.
is, I want to be in a virtual world because it's nicer than the real world.
Yeah, no, that is not a problem I have. I think that would create more problems for me, first and foremost, vertigo. I don't want I have enough of that. I don't need more of that. But I think, your point is that a lot of companies are working backwards where they have a solution in search of a problem. And so when you start with the purpose is, what is the problem we're trying to solve, not what is the problem we're trying to solve with our services. It's what is the problem
Mhm.
we're trying to solve, period. And so that comes from understanding your audience, but what are their pain points? Chris, you like to say, what keeps you up at night? Um, what is the thing that I'm trying to remember all of the different ways that you've put it, because in this context, it makes sense of what is the thing that will either get you promoted or fired? What is the thing you're measured on? What is the thing that is the most troublesome in your week? What is the thing that takes you the longest amount of time to do? Those are pain points. That's what drives constructing and detailing out your purpose. You as the solution seller, your purpose should 100% be reflective of the pain points of your audience. And if you don't know what the pain points of your audience are, that's where you need to start.
Exactly. And that is something that generative AI can actually help with if you have the data. So one of the things that we do for clients and in general, just because I think it's fun, is build personas, build profiles of customers based on actual data. So let's say you were selling smoke shifters for a barbecue, right? Just a ridiculous example. It's a fan. It's just a fan. That's all it is.
Still.
How would you build that persona? You would go and figure out who barbecues, where they talk about barbecuing, and what they talk about. What are the things that are going wrong, right? So put the product out of mind, like you just said. Put the fact that you've got this fan out of mind, and look at the problems people have. So when you're barbecuing, particularly with charcoal, one of the problems is it takes a really freaking long time to get the coals up to temperature, and as long as you're doing it properly. Now, you can, as I have done, just pour 2 bottles of lighter fluid on the barbecue and just create the massive fireball, and that does get things started. However, some people say it does leave food with a sort of a fuel taste. You can use all these different chimneys and stuff like that, but that's the pain point. Is I love the taste of charcoal barbecuing, but I don't have 45 minutes to wait when I just got to get dinner on the table during the weeknight. Yeah, I can do it on the weekend, but I don't have 45 minutes to wait during the weekdays when I've been at the office for 12 hours and so on and so forth. So how do I solve that problem? Doing that assessment, if you were to go on to Reddit or use social monitoring software or go into barbecuing forums or talking to people who are barbecuing, that amazing thing that marketers almost never do, which is talking to customers, will highlight a lot of feedback you can then take into a generative AI system and say, summarize and outline the major things people complain about when barbecuing. And once you've got that data distilled down, then you can say, do we solve any of these problems? You may have a smoke shifter. No one has a problem with smoke blowing in their face, right? That's because your grill's generally outside. You just move. You don't need to buy an $89 gadget.
Yeah, you can just literally step aside.
Exactly. But if you have a device that can move a lot of air, and it turns out that people are having a very hard time getting their coals to a proper temperature, can your device be used to accelerate how quickly those coals heat up? The answer is yes. That's why people use hair dryers in barbecues. Yes, you can use a hot air hair dryer on a barbecue to dramatically accelerate how fast the coals get the speed. Leaf blower works well too.
I will not derail this episode, but I have so many questions. So many questions.
And so, through that market research, through building that ideal customer profile and digesting in all of that data with generative AI, you might say, okay, we've got a product. It doesn't solve the problem we say it solves, but it does solve this other problem. Maybe we should try changing our selling approach to address the real pain points people have. And this is the product. And we basically pivot the product itself.
One of the things I want to highlight that you've been talking about but haven't explicitly said is that, this is all of the qualitative data. This is all of the, unstructured, conversational data. The reason why companies struggle with this information is because it's hard to analyze. Historically, it's been hard to analyze because you can have so much of it. And, we've done, machine learning techniques like topic modeling to find like what are the common themes, but not every company has access to do that kind of machine learning analysis. Fast forward to today, And companies have access to tools like Google Gemini or ChatGPT or Llama or Claude or pick a tool. And summarization is one of the main categories of use cases of generative AI. And that's what you're talking about, Chris, is you're saying, give me all of this text, give me all of this conversational data, market research that companies have struggled to make sense of because there's so much of it, and just summarize it down to a few pain points so that I can say, do we solve for that or not?
Exactly. We are talking about leveraging, and this is a point that you make frequently, Katie. Data is not just numbers in a spreadsheet. Data is any information you have laying around.
Mhm.
You have probably more data than you know what to do with. Your customer service inbox is filled with it. Your call center is filled with it. Your website comments box is filled with it. Anywhere that a customer can talk to you is data, is customer facing data. And if you're not making use of it, you're basically ignoring the big pile of gold and then running around the yard with a shovel going, why can't I find anything valuable? Like, well, you already have a pile of gold. You're just ignoring it.
So I feel like, so we're still sort of on the purpose, which I think is a great place to be focused on. So why aren't companies using like social listening tools or anything like that to really understand their pain points? Are those tools not doing a deep enough analysis?
Though the tools don't do analysis generally, other than
Mm,
summarizing top level data, they certainly don't do any of the qualitative research processing. So a big part of AI enablement is to say, hey, what tools in your MarTech stack do you already have? What data do they output? And
mhm,
then do you have access to a large language model with sufficiently large memory to be able to process that data and boil it down? So, for example, with one of our clients, we get thousands and thousands of website survey responses every month.
mhm,
Prior to the advent of language models, no one looked at that data because there was just too much of it. And so once a language model came around that had enough of a context window, we could feed it all to it and say, summarize this. And now you have action. Now you can take action on that. Um,
mhm.
More than anything, when it comes to generative AI for sales, it is, do the people do the people know that these capabilities exist? You have a CRM, right? Like HubSpot or Salesforce, or choose a CRM of your choice. You have customer interactions logged in that. You have called sales notes from your salespeople, I hope. Um, what's going on with that data? Are you using
Mhm.
it? You have one-on-ones with your sales manager and your individual salespeople. And those one-on-ones should be frequent, should be like weekly one-on-ones where you're saying, hey, Katie, so what was good this week? What are you blocked on? What deals are you working on? Why is that deal taking so long to move?
Mhm.
And what are you doing with that information? You could be, with permission and consent, you could be recording all that and then feeding all those transcripts every week into a tool to say, here's the pain points that our sales team is having. And you might notice a seasonality, like, hey, I can't get a hold of anyone. It's the week of July 1. I can't get a hold of anyone. I'm like, well, yeah, that's because everyone's on vacation. Or you might hear things like, yeah, for some reason, people just saying we just can't get budget approvals right now. Okay, then now you have useful information from the front lines saying
Mhm.
this is an issue. And again, this comes down to the people not knowing what capabilities are available, because if they don't know those capabilities, then they can't build a process around it, and they can't use the platform to make that happen. The purpose is pretty clear. You want to improve your sales, right? You want to improve your closing rates. You want to make more money. But the people need to know what capabilities exist and how to set up processes for that, and what platforms to use to get that performance.
So I like where you're going with this, because what you're maybe knowingly or unknowingly doing is you're setting up different versions of the 5 Ps. And so we started with, what is the problem we're trying to solve for our customers? But then you've also talked about, what are the capabilities of our existing tool set? Each of those questions can have its own set of 5P requirements or 5P answers. Because, so let's say you start with, okay, the problem that we're trying to understand the problem that we're trying to solve for our customers. And so we say, here are the people, the process we're going through is, this and that, and here are the platforms. But you get stuck at platform and say, well, we have a CRM, we have social listening tools, we have this, we have that. Do those things answer those questions? You can go back and spin off a whole different set of 5P requirements to understand, can our CRM answer that question? Does our social listening tool have the capabilities? And then once you get that information, come back to your original set of 5Ps, and then you can augment and say, we will need our CRM, and we'll need our social listening, and we're going to need to acquire some other tool, or our process is going to need to include gathering this additional information. And so that's one of the ways in this context to use the 5Ps in to get to a bunch of different answers, always coming back to, what is the problem we're trying to solve for our customers? What are their pain points? And so once you have a sense of how you're going to get there, then, Chris, to your point, then you can say, do we have services or products that solve those problems?
Exactly. And generative AI is a super useful tool in this particular example, because you can say, here's all the data I have, and here's my purpose, right? Here's what I'm trying to do. And you can say, do you have enough information here to draw those conclusions, or do you need more data? And if so, what additional data do you need to draw those conclusions? You say, here's, tell me what the key components of an ideal customer profile are, and it'll spit out, demographic, needs and pain points, goals, motivations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you say, here's the data I have. What am I missing that would help complete a solid ideal customer profile? And it will say, hey, you don't have purchase history. You don't have this. And then it's like, oh, okay, well, where do I get that? And then you can say, okay, well, I need purchase history from my CRM, or I need interview data from focus groups and one-on-ones. Whatever the thing is that generative AI outlines is like, yeah, it would be nice if you had this. You can almost use it as a tool for helping you do requirements gathering. Say, here's what's missing. Here's the ideal state. And that's what those systems are really good at. They're really good at the big picture. Here's what would be great to have. And then you go back and say, well, here's what I've got. It's like, well, you can do a version of this, but it's not going to be as good if you had this. And then you could say to your tech leaders, to your sales leaders, we need this to solve for this problem. Why sales isn't selling enough? It's because everyone hates the product, right? Or the product's too expensive, or there's not enough of a need. Traditional sales training will say there's no such thing as too expensive. If the need is urgent enough, people will find the budget. Within reason, perhaps, but if you knew what the actual pain points were from data processed by generative AI, then you would have less of that conversation, because you would know this is the level of pain that someone is in. It's not enough to justify the purchase of our product.
Well, what's interesting is, we're talking about direct from customer pain points to the selling process, but marketing's in between the two of those. And it means that marketing also doesn't have the right information for messaging. It also doesn't have the right information for their campaigns, because they are spending budget and resources and, effort and all of these things coming up with campaigns that are not generating leads that sales can't follow up on. And so to your point, you're saying, oh, we just need to get 3,000 leads, and then sales, based on their historic, closing percentage, like they can just close the thing. Not if nobody, marketing, product, sales, whoever, customer support, not if they're addressing the wrong thing. And so it really comes back to, do you know the pain points of your audience? Do you know who your audience is? And so Chris, you're talking about what did you call it? A smoke shifter. You know, you may think that your audience is, people who just grill and barbecue outside. But what if there's, a secondary audience that would stick, depending on the size of it, that smoke shifter inside a fireplace in their home to keep the air circulating and actually push the smoke up the chimney versus into the living room? Like, that's an untapped audience who has a real problem that you may not know you could solve for because the research wasn't done, because there's just this assumption that, well, no, it's people who charcoal grill. That's our audience. That's it.
Mm-hmm. It's the example I used to give with our predictive analytics talks. My Little Pony is purchased by 26 to 40-year-old men in much greater quantities than 8 to 14-year-old girls. If you were relying solely on your assumptions, you would be missing a lucrative audience. You would be missing an audience that has like 10,000x the spending power of what you think your real audience is. And again, that comes from assumptions and not listening to the customers, not using the customer data that you already have. If you are pulling out purchase data, if you're looking at social media data, like, there's a bunch of dudes who are buying like 28 copies of Rainbow whatever. Why is that happening? And should we be marketing into this trend? Should we be selling into this trend? You make an excellent point that marketing needs this data just as much as sales does, if not more. I run into this all the time. There's a game I used to play, Diablo by Blizzard Entertainment. Diablo 4 came out, and they are spending crazy dollars marketing and retargeting me, except that I have a Mac. They didn't make a Mac version. So like, you are wasting money, and you have my data because I also play World of Warcraft. You have my data. You know what kind of computer I play on. Why are you showing me ads for a product I cannot buy? I could buy it, but I won't be able to play it. Again, the customer data is there. No one is connected it to marketing. No one is connected to advertising, and certainly no one is connecting it to sales to say, let's not waste $125 a week trying to market this product to a person who can't buy it.
Again, sounds so simple, but it's not easy because people, despite having the data, still make decisions based on what they think they're calling gut instinct, or they call anecdotal data. Why? Because it's faster. It doesn't mean it's correct, but it's faster because they can get to action faster. So their line of thought is, well, if I can make a decision and I can do a thing, then I have a 50-50 shot of it, going correctly. So I'll take those odds because that's better than spending time that is going to slow me down and I can't take action on it right this second. And that's a problem.
It's a huge problem. When you think about the classic way of qualifying sales leads, particularly in B2B, but this is universal. This came from IBM back in the 70s. They called it BANT: budget, authority, need, and time frame. Right? Those are the four factors that determine whether or not a sale is likely to happen. If someone doesn't have the budget, you're not going to get the sale. If someone can't make a decision, you're not going to get the sale. Right? If someone has no need, you're not going to get the sale. And if someone has no clear time frame, you're not going to get the sale. The problem that has been outlined in sales over the years since that is that these characteristics, very often you don't have all the data for. One of the things that generative AI solves partially is it can partially solve need and time frame if you have customer data from all social listening and data gathered, because you can get an assessment like, okay, when people are talking about this general problem, how important is the need? If people say, I keep getting smoke in my eyes, but whatever, I'll just move to the side, right? You can clearly see there's not much of a need there. And you can see, and if people are talking about solving the problem, like, oh yeah, it took me 9 months to get this product, but whatever, you can see there's not a level of urgency there. Where BANT has gotten into trouble is that sales folks made assumptions to move faster, like you said, to like, oh, this person doesn't have the authority. Well, maybe they do, but we don't know that. But you're assuming because their job title is marketing coordinator that they don't have the authority. Perhaps they do. Perhaps they have the ear of the CMO, and because they're the ones putting together the short list for the CMO. You don't know that. But
Mhm.
generative AI can partially solve that problem, with the caveat it can't solve all of it. It
Right.
can't you can't make those inferences. So again, don't think it's a magic wand if you're trying to use generative AI for sales. It has very good uses for summarization, but by no means is it going to do the selling for you.
So I think what I'm hearing you say to start to like pull it all together. So if we're talking about how to use AI in sales and what problems it can solve, the the challenge that a lot of companies historically had run into is having a lot of qualitative and unstructured data that they couldn't necessarily analyze because of the volume, because of the capabilities. But now that's something that generative AI can help with so that you can really dig into the pain points of your customers so that your marketing can be more focused and your sales team can be selling things that people actually want and want to buy, that there's a real need for, that there's an urgency for. And that comes from understanding your customer and your customer data. What it can't do is, if you have a product in search of a solution, if you have a solution in search of a problem, it's not going to fix that for you. That's very much a human judgment where you have to say, all right, so we don't have anything that addresses the pain points of who we think our target audience is. So we need to do one of two things. One, we need to adjust our expectations of who our audience is, or two, we need to adjust the services and the products that we offer, or a combination of both.
Exactly. And when it comes to that selling framework, list, offer, creative, don't get distracted using generative AI to just endlessly focus on creatives, like rearranging the deck chairs in the Titanic.
Mhm.
Focus on the highest priority things first. Are you selling to the right people? Do you have something those people want? And then worry about, is your sales script or your telephone script or your email nurturing program in good condition or not? Because a less effective sales script, but for a product that people desperately want, you're not going to have any problems. If you've got a product nobody wants, the most finely tuned sales script is going to sell onesies and twosies at best.
Mhm.
And so make sure that your priorities are in order when it comes to using generative AI in sales. If you've got some stories that you want to share about how you're using generative AI in sales, pop on by our free Slack group. Go to trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers, where you and over 3,000 other marketers are asking and answering each other's questions every week about data and analytics and AI. And wherever it is you watch or listen to the show, if there's a channel you'd rather have it on instead, go to trustinsights.ai/TI podcast, and you can find us where most places on podcasts are served. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time.